Hey everybody, we are back for another Stories of Gold show. And this week I have got my guest, Sopheia McMorris, who has got a transformational story to share with us about how she mastered the art of self-mastery. Welcome to the Stories of Gold show, Sopheia.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Sopheia is an executive wisdom mentor. She's a certified professional transformational life coach. She's a CEO and founder of Wisdom Speaks Life. She specializes in using wisdom to help people master and take control of their lives, and teaches and trains people in the art of self-mastery. So I am curious how this journey began, Sopheia. Can you take us back to the beginning when you were just starting out?
Yes. So the way my story started, for years, I struggled with my weight. It started in while I was in high school, early teenage years, and it went all the way into my adulthood. So in this struggle, I knew I had to do something different, but I would just keep doing the same thing over and over again. I call it going around the mountain. And so, what going around the mountain looked like for me was that 3 months out of the year, I would, do some form of exercise, diet, combination of both, a detox, cleanse, and I would lose like 50 pounds. And so I would get excited. And what I called a party, I would start a party that lasted from April all the way to December. And then I would like wake up and discover that I had gained back all the weight and then some. And so this was an ongoing cycle. Every year, my New Year's resolution was lose weight and get healthy. And so after a while, it became very frustrating. And I said, okay, I need to do something different because I'm not really making progress. So I signed up for weight loss surgery. And in signing up for weight loss surgery, I waited 6 months for a surgery date and I didn't get one. So I was again frustrated, disheartened. And so I sat down one day to meditate. And in my meditation, I read a quote that says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou would prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prosper." And for me, I was just like, this wasn't my first time reading that, but for the first time, the word soul spoke to me. And I was just like, what's my soul's prosperity? How can I prosper my soul? And how can prospering my soul actually help me to lose weight and keep it off? So those were my questions that started me on the self-discovery journey. And so in doing that, I was able to discover what my soul was and my soul's prosperity. And I found it wrapped in self-mastery. So that's why I teach and train people in the art of self-mastery, because that is key, being that self-leader, so that way you can be an effective leader, is the key to being able to transform your life. So for me, what that looked like, I had to take responsibility. I had to become consistent in the mastery of my own life. And I was able to release 100 pounds. And so after that, I got so excited. I was just like, oh my goodness, everybody should know about this. I should tell people that definitely about this transformation that I experienced and how it took place, and then help them to be able to do that. So that's when I got certified as a life coach, and I started my business then, and that was in 2013.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, how would you describe or define self-mastery? What does that mean?
Self-mastery is really about mastering your emotions, your behaviors, your actions, all the things that goes on the inside of you, and then lead to that outward manifestation of how you would, let's say, react versus respond to certain situation. So it's really about becoming that self-leader and really leading yourself to become that person that you could be.
Excellent. So take me back to when you were on the cycle going around the mountain, as you put it, where you're on this cycle where every January, I assume you're a lot like a lot of us who set out the beginning of the year with New Year's resolution that I'm going to be in better health and I'm going to lose weight and I'll feel so much better by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were kind of on a repeat cycle where that story kept on playing over and over again.
Yes.
And you would, in the beginning, find some success, but by the end of the year, you were back to where you began plus some.
Yeah.
And not that I can see our listeners right here, but I'm wondering how many of you have felt that same frustration, whether it be with losing weight or finishing that novel that you were writing or writing the book or starting the business or finding that relationship or whatever, but that you go through those same cycles of going around the mountain and you keep finding yourself not where you want to be. I imagine that you have seen a lot of your clients go through that same cycle as well, right?
Yes, yes. So in my early stages, I would create a plan for people. And so we would go through the whole process and then I would interview them and ask them questions. I'd find out about the roadblocks that would possibly get in the way of their success. And I would write this plan for them. And so then they would, I would, deliver the plan, present it, and they would say, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. This is like the best thing I've ever, and, it's my life plan, and this is what I want for my life. And they were all excited about it. And then a couple weeks into it, I would say, so how are you doing with the plan? And they would say, well, the plan is really nice and everything. And then I would be like, well, what? But they couldn't step into that particular place of actually implementing and living the plan. And so this is why, and this was something that I discovered later, was that 95% of our lives are lived in the subconscious mind, and only 5% is lived in conscious mind. And so the question now becomes, how do we get that 95% of us to be in support of the 5% of what we want? So that was the same thing that was happening to me. The 95% of me was not in support of the 5% of what I want, which was to lose weight and keep it off. And so I needed to do some inward work. I needed to not look for the outward solution to fix the inner problem. So that was something that I had to work on diligently. And it's the same thing that I find that my clients have to do. So when I created my course, I created it with, first, we developed the plan of your life. This is what you want. This is what you want to achieve. This is how you want your life to look. And then the back end of it is, now let's get the 95% of you to be in support of the 5% of what you want.
I don't know if you used the analogy of the iceberg when you were describing that, but that's what was coming to mind for me is, you see the iceberg and I'm sure there's enough memes out there on the internet that we probably have all seen the iceberg where 95% of the iceberg is underwater and only 5% of it is above the water so we can see it. Right. So 5% of what, whether that be weight or whether it be anything else in our lives where, we have the tangible result, the part of who we want to be that is visible, that is easily seen, doesn't look like we want it to look. We still have that weight. We still have, the unfinished manuscripts. We still have the business that isn't succeeding like we would like it to be succeeding. There's all this frustration that happens because what we're seeing above the water line, the thing that everybody else sees as well, doesn't look like what we have in mind as to what we want, right?
Right.
And it's from what I understand you're saying is it's, let's not forget about that 5%, but let's look at what's underneath that 5%, the rest of the iceberg, the 95% that's below the line and not easily visible, so that we can be in alignment in getting what we want to be getting. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Because, the belief system, we can't see what our belief systems are. We can't see what our values are. We just know that we have some thoughts that leads to emotions. Sometimes we get triggered about certain things and, we kind of go off or react instead of respond. And so all of those things are factors in getting what we want. And I always say I work on the self relationship in order to, get that support. So you get those things in line, then it's like you become the person that becomes like almost like automatic. It becomes that automatic program that supports you in the 5% of what you want. You no longer get the fears. I mean, you'll still experience fear, but you'll recognize that you have courage now to push past and get to the other side of doing what it is that you want to do. And so a lot of times we just kind of, end up spinning our wheels because we don't recognize that self-discovery is so important. Really gaining that self-knowledge so that we can move ourselves from point A to point B, from where we are now to where we want to be.
Sure. So what are some of the tools that you use to help your clients go below the surface to look at the subconscious mind, the iceberg below the water line? Because again, that stuff isn't necessarily visible. It's part of us, but we don't see it as easily as we can see, a bank account or a weight on the scale or something like that.
Right.
How do you get to that 95%?
Well, we start first with a self-understanding and really understand how your mind works, how you think, how you feel, and understanding your emotions, understanding some of the old things that, may have led to, because as a child, we're programmed. So we become kind of like empty slates, and then we get programmed with all this stuff from childhood. And that's, the parents, that's the environment, that's how, you were raised, that's the schools you went to and what was taught to you, what was the emphasis and all the things. So those things are collectively who we become when we're older. So based on the messages that we have, we then, may start making decisions according to those. So we address some of those things, and it doesn't all unfold all at once. So, and it's like an onion with the different layers. So it's like peeling one back, and then, as you keep going, you never even realize that you had certain beliefs. And then I've heard people talk about like those core beliefs, like you have certain core beliefs that will not allow you to even have a thought about a particular, thing. Let's say you wanted to, scale your business, or you only felt like you could maybe make only this much amount of money, so then, you have certain things that kind of hold you in place. So you never go further than where you are. So we then have to ask the question, like how it is that people who have, been born into families where they were brought up poor, there was a lot of lack and everything and limits and all of those things, but they still went on to achieve. And so then look at those type of things and then be able to address some of those issues of the, the limiting beliefs and all of those.
So do these beliefs and values and kind of past stories, do they come up through dialogue, or are people writing them out? Or are they meditating? Yes. Or
wow, they're doing a combination. Yeah, so they're doing a combination. So we have meditations, we also have journaling, we also have affirmations, and those are a part of the process. But really, the clearer path is really understanding of how information goes in, and then how that information, like we are moved by our heart beliefs. So whatever it is that our heart beliefs is that's the direction that we're going. So we take a look at the different types of beliefs that people could possibly have, and then address them, so that way we can then start, planting planting the seed of change that we want to have occur.
I love that phrase, heart belief, that, there's I think of it kind of as our conscious belief, what we recognize as, I'm a guy, middle-aged, whatever, that is more visible. But then there's the heart beliefs, the part of us that lies below the surface. And it's interesting, as I do these motions, I'm realizing, this is like above the water, this is below the water.
Yes.
And how we access that, how do we do the scuba diving in order to get down there?
Yeah.
So I am curious, going back to that verse that you shared with us in the beginning of our conversation, and I'm going to just look it up again myself. So basically, the way in the version that I've got, and I've got the King James version, it says, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. So it's, it's this wish, this grand vision for, your soul prospering and living a richer, more fuller life. So let's go back to that moment when that happened, when you had read that verse before, but it hadn't struck you in the same way that it did it at this time, right? And you'd been on this going around the mountain process for a while, for years.
Yes.
And suddenly you see this, it's like you're on the mountain and you can see things differently than what you had seen before. The fog lifts, let's say.
Yeah.
So let's go back to that moment and tell me how did things unfold from that point? Did everything change at once? Was it a gradual process? Was there some excavating that you had to do in order to move from where you had been to where you wanted to be? Tell me about how that went.
Well, one of the first things that happened is when I read that and the word wish, I started thinking about that word. And I said, it's not a wish. If I'm thinking that God wants good for me, then it is part of his will for me to be this way. And that was very important in changing my belief about where I was. And as I look at the different words as part of the process, that's, I become like this other, where I start accepting these new beliefs, that this is not just like a fleeting moment. Because I see wish as, we're like a fantasy, like, it's something that could happen, maybe possibly happen, but it's not necessary to happen. And I took it like, no, this is his will for me. Therefore, I'm willing to figure out, do the work, so that way I can achieve this. So that was my determination. But I had to look at both words.
And I find that interesting. One of the words that I use a lot is desire. And I think about desire along the lines of what you're saying about with wish, is that a desire, if you go back in the etymology or the history of the word, it means of the stars. So, it's like this heavenly guidance that leads us. It's not just some fanciful thing, I wish I had $1 million, I wish I had, whatever, but it's actually saying this is something that you could have. So as you're experiencing and processing this message that you'd found, you realize that it wasn't just this fanciful wish, but that it was God's will for you, that you could be at a better place.
Yes.
And I love that idea that, that we have this higher power that sees in us what could be, not just what is, right? And that by, kind of following along the path that we discover that we go from going around the mountain to actually summiting the mountain, to getting to the top.
Right.
We're no longer lost in the fog or in the snowfields or whatever, but that we find the way to get to where we want to go.
Right. Yeah, I describe it like I needed to get up. I needed to figure out a way to get up and over the mountain and get to the other side. So that was how, because I could literally see me, when I used the word going around the mountain, because it was just a circular thing that was kept happening. And then when I needed to get up and over the mountain, I could see myself cutting a path through the mountain. You're going to experience all types of obstacles, bushes, where past it. It's not a path that's already created. So now you have to basically create that path for yourself in order to get up and over the mountain and get to the other side. The other word that I really like to use that is the word committed. And so there's a want and then there's commitment. And when I think about, a lot of people, like the 95% and the 5% of us, 5% says, I want this, I want that, I want the other. And so it's important to recognize your wants, of course. But the thing is, what are you committed to? And so now we get to this place where we have to say, I am committed to doing this in order to get that, to get what I want. And so I usually, when I talk to people and they say, well, what kind of clients are you looking for? And I say, I am looking for people who are committed to living to their highest good. That's it, because it's not a negotiation at that point. It's not, I want it, but if I don't get it, it's okay. It's a must. I must live this way. I am committed to implementing whatever I need to implement in order to achieve this in my life.
So it's going back to the mountain metaphor, and I keep returning. Last month, I was literally on Mount Rainier in Washington State, and it's this 14,000 plus foot high mountain. And the vistas were amazing, but it is a big mountain. It's not just tall, but I mean, you could easily get lost on the mountain. And it takes effort to climb that mountain, right? It's not just this. You can't drive to the top of Mount Rainier. You can't just, stay in the car and la-di-da, get there. But it takes effort. It takes commitment, like you're saying, and a willingness to, do the work to get to where you want to go, and to figure out, how do I find my path that helps me to get where I want to go.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you have to be, like you said, you can't be like, well, we're going to sit in the car and just drive up the mountain. You have to get out and invest the time, the energy, the effort, and your money too, in a lot of it, when you're ready to change your life and do something that you want. Like you had to fly to or maybe drive to, but either way, you invested in order to get to the top of this mountain. And so that's what it's going to take for people to truly transform their life and to start mastering, their lives. So that way they can have what they want.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we did fly there. I live in North Carolina, so driving back there is a very long journey, but flying, although the flight was also quite a commitment, because another long story, which we won't get into here, but
yes.
We have to be pretty committed.
Yes. So that's it. I mean, I think whenever we want anything in our lives, we definitely have to have that commitment, because it doesn't always happen on the first try, and also along with the commitment, you have to employ some consistency. You have to be willing to take responsibility, like all of those things I had to learn. And then there was an interesting factor that came as a result. So one day I sat down, and my food of choice, whenever I would emotionally eat and get stressed out, I would eat a brownie pie, like a whole brownie pie. And so one day I sat down, and I believe that God said to me, do you know why you eat sweets? And I was just like, no. And I was just like, why? And he says, because you want somebody to be sweet to you. And it made so much sense. But that was like the open door for me to employ self-love and to start nurturing myself and to really start putting those things in place. And that was a clue as well. Now, whenever I would get upset again, now that I would say, okay, well, what's going on? What do we need to address? What we need to talk about? And then employ some self-compassion, some empathy, and some kindness to myself.
I can really relate to that. Growing up, food was our love language in my family. Whenever we had birthdays, we could choose whatever we wanted to eat, you know, and mom would go out of her way preparing all kinds of things. And so I, at least in my mind, when I go to get in that emotional upset place, I go to food in order to satiate that emotional need, which obviously is not always the healthiest way to.
Yes, it has consequences that you doesn't necessarily want after that, you know, because, you know, you have the weight gain and stuff. And then it depends on how often you're being upset and how often you're choosing to, you know, to satisfy yourself. And sometimes it's not even satisfaction, it's more suppression. It's a suppression, you know, it's like, I'm going to keep myself quiet by just focusing on eating this food. I'm not going to express my emotions because I'm just going to eat this food, because if I start saying anything, then people are going to get upset. And so there's a lot of suppression that happens, and, you know, ways that we kind of numb ourselves and dumb ourselves down, so that way we don't have to do this expressing ourselves and have people think differently of us, and, you know, upset the apple cart, as some would say, and all of those things. But then it ends up costing you more than you want. You have, you know, you recognize that you're just in this place where you're consistently suppressing yourself. And then after a while, you could have a moment of where you just get volatile. You just like blow up, and it's like, that's it. And then now you're apologizing, you're having regrets and all of these other kind of things. So,
sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Very good point. So I'm curious, and just out of curiosity, rather than having the brownie pies, what do you do now?
Now I go for walks. So I do a combination of things. I journal, and I go for walks. And when I go for walks, I have what I call my processing time, or this open conversation where I'm talking out loud. Just like I'm talking to you, I am talking just that way as I'm walking in the woods, and I'm talking to God, I'm talking to myself, I'm talking the trees, whatever. But I'm having this conversation about, this thing is really disturbing to me. You know, this is not fair, or this is not right, or however I need to express it, I express it. And I find that that is so helpful to me. It's very therapeutic, because then my voice is able to be heard. And so a lot of times we can find ourselves not having our voice being heard because we're doing so much suppression and,
sure,
you know, quieting down or dumbing down, you know. But when I'm able to express fully, then I can release and let go, and, you know, and say, oh my goodness, I come out feeling so much better. And then I can have, you know, if I still need to have that conversation with whichever person I need to have the conversation with, I can approach it from a different standpoint, not from a point where I'm all, you know, emotional and volatile. I can just be very clear, very succinct, very assertive and confident in saying, you know, I didn't appreciate what you said, or you know, I didn't appreciate what you did. And either way, you know, you make it so that way you can be heard. Because when you get crazy and you're, you know, screaming and all of these other type of things, that doesn't work. People shut down, they don't always hear you. So you want to be able to approach things in a calm and, you know, consistent way, so that way you can be heard and understood. But that they're definitely, you're not dumbing down yourself, and you're not being aggressive, but you're being very assertive and confident in what you're doing.
Excellent. Thank you. Very good words, wise words to ponder and to reflect on. How can we, what are we not expressing? What are we suppressing? And how do we choose a different path? You know, do we go for a walk? Do we, you know, one of the things that I do is I bring out my phone and 6 days out of the week, I record my daily recording, which is just literally when I'm walking out in the woods and thinking about a subject, I'll record about 6 minutes of thoughts. But hearing my voice, and then the next week I go back and listen to that. And it just really helps to be able to not only to express it, but to listen to it and to build upon that. And that as we do that, then we can create, you know, greater clarity.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can process ourselves that will help us in that being able to, you know, to be expressive and not suppress ourselves. You know, I mean, like I mentioned, I'd say journaling and, you know, just talking things out, writing things down, you know, visualizing, you know, having that conversation. Sometimes I'm just like, you need to get to that place where you can be mad. I remember talking to a client and I was just like, you know, you might need to visualize the person or put a pillow and let it be representative of them. And then just, you know, punch the pillow and, you know, or, you know, put the pillow and then just talk to it just exactly the way that you would, you know, when you're mad and you don't think that what they're doing is right. And, you know, those kind of things, because you have to find some way of getting it out. So that way it doesn't become this block or this thing that gets built up, and then you start, you know, finding ways to manage it or live with it or, you know, because that's the other thing. It's like, sometimes we can make friends with our problems.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
and we turn it over, we look at it, we, you know, we just, you know, just there's a way that we just make friends with it and we hold it close to us. And if somebody says something about a problem, then we just kind of go off. You know, we're very protective of it. And I think sometimes we just need to deal with it. Absolutely. And you know, and there's a way of, you know, accepting it, forgiving, and just letting it go.
That's excellent. So Sopheia, in conclusion, I've got few questions for you. Okay. One, for our listeners, how can they connect with you and receive of the wisdom that you have to impart?
Well, they can go to my website. It's sopheiaspeakswisdom.com. And Sopheia is spelled with an E, so it's Sopheia. Sopheia with an E.
Excellent. Thank you. So another question that I ask all my guests is, what makes for a richer story in your mind?
I think it's that overcoming and becoming. And I would think that is the richness of any story, is that we always have this place where we are overcoming, we have a start, and then we become something. But I also think that the story in the middle is really important, because that's the part, you know, where I used to always ask when I hear people, they say, you know, like, once I was blind, but now I can see, or once I was this, and then now I'm here. And I'm like, what is the story in the middle? Because that is the place where people are able to learn from. They're able to see themselves even in that middle journey before you get to the other side.
Absolutely. Yes. Wonderful. I love that. So often we skipped act 2 in our 3-act play, and it's, you know, I was this, now I'm this. But, well, how did that happen? You know,
right.
I can't do much about for myself. I can't do much about I was this, now I'm this. Tell me about, how do we actually get there? How do we climb that mountain?
Right. And that was always my question. And that, I think, that also was a part of why I, became a life coach, because I wanted to help people with the middle. And I still do. That is most of my work. And the middle is like the foundation of it. So that's the 95% that we get that middle place, and we get that worked on. And then that way we go on to becoming whatever we want to be.
That's awesome. So my final question for you is, how are you creating a richer story for yourself?
Well, for me, every day I work on myself. I say I have a me first attitude, is that I need to be everything that I'm going to tell you about, everything that I'm going to share with you. So it's an experience that I have lived first. So I have firsthand experience, and then I'm able to share with you, because then I'm sharing I'm sharing truth, I'm sharing, what my experience have been. And so your experience might be slightly different, but recognizing that somebody went through it before you is like the key. So I work on myself on a daily basis. I work on my beliefs. I work on becoming even more of the person that I want to be, living to my highest self. And so I'm committed to doing that for me. And so that's why I encourage other people to be committed to living to their highest self.
That's awesome. Beautiful. Thank you, Sopheia, for sharing your story of gold with me and with my audience. And my invitation to my audience is to be the bright light in someone's dark night. Until our stories meet again.
Thank you.